In February 2013, guests at a hotel in downtown Los Angeles began to complain. The water coming out of their taps was wrong. The pressure was weak. It tasted strange, almost sweet, and it looked dark. For days they had been drinking it, showering in it, brushing their teeth with it. Finally, a maintenance worker was sent up to the roof of the hotel to check the water supply. Up there sat 4 huge metal tanks, each one 8 feet tall, holding 1,000 gallons of water each. He climbed up to inspect them, and he found that the lid of one tank was open. He looked inside, and floating in the water was the body of a young woman. Her name was Elisa Lam. She was 21 years old, a college student from Vancouver, Canada, who had been traveling alone. She had been missing for nearly 3 weeks. And here is the question that has haunted people for over a decade. The door to that roof was locked. It was alarmed. The tanks were difficult to climb. How does a young woman end up inside a sealed water tank on the roof of a locked building, in a spot almost impossible to reach? Because the last time anyone saw Elisa Lam alive, she was captured on a security camera, alone, in an elevator, behaving in a way that no one has ever been able to fully explain. This is the story of a bright young woman, a hotel with a dark past, and one of the most debated deaths of the modern age. Before she became the subject of a million internet theories, Elisa Lam was simply a young woman with a life, a family, and a future. She was born in 1991 in Vancouver, Canada, the daughter of parents who had immigrated from Hong Kong and built a life running a restaurant. She was a student at the University of British Columbia. The people who knew her described her as warm, funny, imaginative, and deeply thoughtful. She kept a blog online where she wrote openly and honestly about her life, about books she loved, about fashion, about travel, and about the things she struggled with. Because Elisa also lived with something difficult. She had bipolar disorder, a mental health condition that causes powerful swings in mood and energy. It's something millions of people live with and manage every day. Elisa was managing it too, with medication. But like many people with the condition, she found it a real and ongoing challenge, and she was honest about that on her blog. In early 2013, Elisa decided to do something brave. She planned a solo trip down the west coast of the United States, all by herself. From Vancouver, she would travel through California, a young woman setting out to see the world on her own terms. She reached San Diego. She visited the zoo and posted photos. She was in touch with her parents every single day by phone. That was their arrangement, a daily check-in so they'd know she was safe. Then she arrived in Los Angeles, and she checked into a hotel called the Cecil. To understand what happened next, you have to understand that hotel. The Cecil Hotel opened in 1924 in the heart of downtown Los Angeles. When it was built, it was grand. 700 rooms, a beautiful marble lobby, stained glass. It was meant to be a destination for business travelers and tourists. But within just a few years, the Great Depression hit. The neighborhood around the Cecil collapsed into what became known as Skid Row, one of the poorest, hardest areas of the city, and the hotel's fortunes fell with it. Over the decades that followed, the Cecil developed a reputation, a dark one. It became associated with a long history of tragedy, numerous deaths within its walls over the years. It became known as a place where desperate people ended up. Its grim reputation grew so notorious that it earned nicknames in the press and even inspired fictional horror stories. There were also whispers about the criminals who had passed through. It's often reported that at least one infamous serial killer stayed at the Cecil in the 1980s, when rooms were cheap and no questions were asked. Whether or not every legend about the hotel is strictly true, the atmosphere was undeniable. By 2013, the hotel had been partly rebranded and renamed Stay on Main, trying to attract young budget travelers and backpackers with cheap rooms in a central location. That's almost certainly why Elisa chose it. For a student traveling alone on a budget, it made perfect sense, affordable, and right in the middle of the city. She had no way of knowing the building's reputation. She checked in on January 28, 2013. At first, she was placed in a shared, hostel-style room with other travelers. But within 2 days, something changed. During her first days at the hotel, Elisa did what she'd been doing all along. She explored the city. She visited a famous local bookstore, the last bookstore, where the manager remembered her clearly. She said Elisa was charming and enthusiastic, chatting about books, picking out gifts to bring home to her family. She seemed like a young woman looking forward to going home, to reconnecting with the people she loved. That's the Elisa her family knew. But at the hotel, something was shifting. Elisa had been placed in a shared room, and after a couple of days, her roommates complained to staff about her behavior. They said she was acting strangely, leaving odd notes, doing things they found unsettling. In response, the hotel moved her out of the shared room and into a private room by herself. Looking back, with what we understand about her condition, many believe Elisa may have been slipping into an episode. The kind of shift in mood and perception that bipolar disorder can bring, especially for someone away from home, off their usual routine, under the stress of solo travel. She was still calling her parents every day. It was their safety net. As long as the daily calls came, they knew she was okay. And then, on around January 31st, the calls stopped. Her parents, waiting in Vancouver, heard nothing. A day passed, then another. For parents who spoke to their daughter every single day, the silence was terrifying. They knew immediately that something was deeply wrong. On February 8th, they contacted the Los Angeles police. Elisa Lam was officially a missing person. But unknown to everyone searching for her, there was already a piece of footage recorded on the day she vanished that would soon become one of the most watched and most debated videos on the entire internet. As part of the search, police reviewed the hotel's security footage. They needed to establish where Elisa went and when. And they found her, on a camera, inside one of the hotel's elevators, recorded on the day she was last seen. When the police released this footage to the public, hoping someone would recognize her and come forward, it did something no one expected. It went viral, eventually watched tens of millions of times, because the video is deeply strange. In it, Elisa steps into the elevator alone. She presses several buttons, many buttons, all at once. Then she waits, but the elevator doesn't move. She steps to the doorway and leans out, looking left and right down the hall, as if checking whether someone is there. She steps back in. She presses into the corner, seeming to hide. She steps out again and stands to the side of the doors, pressed against the wall, out of view. Then she makes strange movements with her hands and arms, gestures that look almost like she's talking to someone we cannot see, or counting, or reacting to something outside the frame. And through all of this, the elevator doors simply stay open. They never close. The car never moves. Some people who watched it saw a young woman hiding in fear from a pursuer. Others saw signs of a mental health crisis, a manic or psychotic episode. Some, drawn in by the hotel's dark reputation, reached for supernatural explanations, or claimed the footage had been slowed down or edited. What almost everyone agreed on was this: something was very wrong. This was a young woman in distress, and it was the last time she was ever seen alive. After the elevator video, Elisa Lam simply vanished. The police investigation was extensive. Officers searched the hotel. They brought in scent-tracking dogs, which followed Elisa's trail through the building, and then lost it near a window that led out toward the fire escape. They checked the footage from the hotel's exits and became satisfied that Elisa had never left the building through the main doors. Everything pointed to one impossible fact. She was still somewhere inside, or on, the Cecil Hotel, and yet they could not find her. The Cecil was an enormous building, hundreds of rooms, many occupied by long-term residents. Police couldn't search every private room without cause. They canvassed the area, interviewed staff and guests, and put out public appeals. Elisa's parents flew down from Canada, desperate for answers, pleading for information about their daughter. Days stretched into weeks, and still, nothing. Meanwhile, life at the hotel went on. Guests came and went. They slept and washed and drank from the taps in their rooms. None of them knew. For nearly 3 weeks, the search for Elisa Lam turned up no trace of her at all. It was as if she had simply disappeared into thin air, somewhere within a building she had never been seen leaving. The answer to where she was had been there the entire time. Above their heads, it would take a set of complaints about the water, its taste, its color, its pressure, before anyone thought to look in the one place no one had checked. On February 19th, 2013, after days of guest complaints about the water, a maintenance worker named Santiago Lopez went up to the roof of the Cecil Hotel to inspect the tanks. The roof was not an easy place to reach. The door leading to it was supposed to be locked and fitted with an alarm that would sound if it was opened. There were fire escapes that offered another way up, but none of it was simple or obvious. Up on the roof stood the 4 great water tanks, each 8 feet high. Lopez climbed up to check them, and he saw that the hatch on top of one tank was open. He looked inside, and there, in the water, he found Elisa Lam. Her body was floating in the tank that had been supplying water to the hotel's guests. Her clothes were floating in the water beside her. The tank was so difficult to access, and the opening so awkward, that firefighters could not simply lift her out. They had to cut into the side of the metal tank to recover her body. And immediately, the questions began. How did Elisa get up to that roof, past a locked and alarmed door? How did she climb the tank? How did she get inside it, and why? And most puzzlingly of all, some noted if she had climbed in herself. How was the heavy lid found in the position it was? Every answer seemed to lead to another question. An autopsy was performed. But by this point, Elisa's body had been in the water for close to 3 weeks, and that made the medical examiner's work extremely difficult. The findings, when they came, would not put the questions to rest. If anything, they would fuel them. So what really happened to Elisa Lam? Let's start with what the investigation concluded. After the autopsy and toxicology tests, the Los Angeles County coroner ruled Elisa's death an accident, accidental drowning, with her bipolar disorder listed as a significant contributing factor. The reasoning was this: the toxicology showed no alcohol and no illegal drugs in her system. But it also suggested that Elisa had not been consistently taking all of her prescribed medication in the days before her death. To those who accept the official finding, the picture is tragic but clear. Elisa, away from home and off some of her medication, likely entered a severe manic or psychotic episode. That would explain the elevator video, the fear, the hiding, the strange gestures, as the signs of someone in genuine crisis, perhaps believing she was being followed. In that state, she may have made her way up to the roof, seeking escape or safety, climbed into the tank and been unable to get out. A terrible accident, driven by a mental health emergency. But not everyone is satisfied, and the doubts are real ones. How did she get through a locked, alarmed roof door? How did a small young woman lift herself into a tank 8 feet tall? Could she really have closed the heavy lid behind her? And if she didn't, who did? Her phone was never found, and the sheer strangeness of the elevator footage left many convinced that something, or someone, else was involved. Over the years, the case has attracted endless theories, some thoughtful, some wild, some crossing painful lines and causing real harm to the people connected to the hotel and to Elisa's own grieving family. And that is the part we should not lose sight of. Beneath the viral video and the internet mystery was a real person, a 21-year-old woman who loved books, who was buying gifts for her family, who was trying to see the world. Whatever happened on that rooftop, Elisa Lam's story is, at its heart, a tragedy, of a young life lost, far from home, and of a family who lost their daughter. The official answer is accident. The internet has never fully accepted it, and more than a decade later, the The questions of exactly how and exactly why remain unresolved. This has been The Dark Stories. Sleep well.